3 years ago, my front Bermuda was pale and yellow in July, and I'd already dumped $60 of nitrogen on it. It got greener for a week, then thinned out worse. So I mixed up a liquid in my Chapin sprayer that costs about $1 a gallon. 48 hours later, that lawn was the deepest green on the block. No growth surge. No mowing twice a week. Just color. Here's the thing. The fertilizer industry has spent 70 years training you to reach for the nitrogen bag, because that's the product they actually sell. This liquid you can make in your garage. Stay with me, because at the end I'll give you the exact ratio I use, plus the one cheap additive that stops it from staining your concrete and your shoes. Here's the thing. The pale, hungry-looking lawn you keep feeding isn't really about you doing something wrong. It's about who got to decide what feeding your lawn even means. And that decision goes back about 70 years to the synthetic nitrogen industry. Let me give you the piece of history nobody puts on the bag. During World War II, this country built enormous plants to make ammonium nitrate. That's a munitions ingredient. When the war ended, those plants didn't shut down. In the late 1940s, they got converted over to civilian fertilizer manufacturing, and suddenly there was a mountain of nitrogen and no battlefield to put it on. So they needed a market. They found one in the suburbs. The post-war lawn boom became the place to dump the nitrogen surplus. That's where the NPK number on every bag comes from. Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. The guaranteed analysis label puts those 3 macronutrients front and center, big and bold, because that's the product they're selling you. Iron and the other micronutrients? Fine print, if they're listed at all. Most of the time, they're left off entirely. Read the label sometime. You'll see exactly what I mean. And here's what that training cost you. The average homeowner down here spends $60 and up every season chasing green out of a nitrogen bag. You get a growth surge for a week, sure. Then the lawn thins out worse because you forced soft, lush top growth the plant couldn't support. That soft growth invites fungus, and now you're mowing twice a week to keep up with grass that still isn't the color you wanted. Meanwhile, the actual fix costs about $1 a gallon. Now, this matters even more where I am, in North Texas, on heavy clay with a high soil pH. That combination changes everything about why the grass yellows in the first place. And once you understand that, the whole nitrogen story falls apart. So let's walk through it together, starting with exactly what's in that liquid. Here's the thing. The liquid I sprayed isn't some secret formula. It's iron. Specifically, it's ferrous sulfate, iron sulfate, FeSO4 if you want the chemistry. And the old-timers at the feed store call it copperas. That's COPPERAS, and despite the name, it's got nothing to do with copper. It's a fine gray-green powder, garden grade, and you can buy a pound of it for a few dollars at a feed store or a garden center if you know to ask for it. A pound makes a whole lot of gallons. Run the math and you land right around $1 a gallon mixed up and ready to spray. I dissolve it in my Chapin 4-gallon backpack sprayer, the same one I calibrate before every single application, and I put my gear on before I touch it. Nitrile gloves, goggles, my half-face respirator. Read the label, every time, even on something this simple. That's the liquid. $1 a gallon mineral that's been sold by the pound for over 100 years. And it is nowhere on the front of a premium lawn fertilizer bag, because there's no premium in it. Now here's where it gets interesting. Most folks see a yellow lawn, and their brain says one word: nitrogen. That's the training I told you about. But a yellow lawn down here usually isn't starving for nitrogen at all. It's iron chlorotic, iron chlorosis. And those two problems look almost identical to the eye. Pale, washed out, yellowing blades. Which is exactly why people guess wrong and reach for the wrong bag. Here's what's actually happening in my soil and probably yours. I'm on heavy clay with a high pH, and high pH clay chemically locks iron up. The iron is right there in the dirt. There's plenty of it. But at that pH, it binds into forms the plant simply can't pull up through the roots. So the grass goes hungry for iron while it's standing in a soil that's full of it. And iron is not optional. Iron is the catalyst the plant needs to build chlorophyll, the green pigment itself. No available iron, no chlorophyll production, no green. Simple as that. So now picture what I did 3 years ago, and what my neighbor across the street still does every July. The lawn goes pale. I read it as nitrogen. I dump $60 of nitrogen on it. And what does nitrogen do? It forces growth. It tells a stressed, iron-starved plant to push out a flush of new top growth that doesn't have the iron to color, or the root system to support. So you get a week of slightly less yellow, faster-growing grass, and then it thins out worse than before, because you spent the plant's energy on growth instead of fixing the thing that was actually broken. I did this for years. I was right there with you, piling fuel on a plant that didn't need fuel. It needed the one mineral the soil was hiding from it. And you will not find that explanation printed on the nitrogen bag, because the nitrogen bag has exactly one job, and it isn't diagnosing your soil. That's the why. Now here's the why it's so fast, and this is the part that genuinely surprised me the first time I watched it happen. When you spray that iron solution onto the grass, onto the blade, not the soil, the leaf absorbs it directly. We call that a foliar application. Foliar just means you're feeding through the leaf instead of through the roots. And because you're bypassing the soil entirely, you're bypassing the whole high pH lockup problem that started this mess. The iron goes straight into the blade where the chlorophyll lives. It doesn't have to be dug up by roots. It doesn't have to fight the soil chemistry. It just walks right in the front door of the leaf. And the grass greens up in 24 to 48 hours. 2 days. I've watched a pale July Bermuda go to the deepest green on the block in a single weekend. And here's the part that separates iron from nitrogen completely. Foliar iron doesn't drive growth. It intensifies the chlorophyll the plant already has the machinery to make. It deepens the color in the existing blades, instead of triggering cell expansion and a flush of new tissue. So you get color without the growth surge. You read that right. No taller grass. No mowing twice a week. No soft, lush, fungus-bait top growth. Just a darker, richer green showing up across the same lawn you already had. That's the whole trick. Nitrogen gives you more grass and worse color. Iron gives you the same grass and the color you were actually chasing the entire time. I tested this the same careful way I test everything. I've spent seasons documenting how tenacity behaves when you spray it in heat stress versus cool morning air, and I treated iron the same way. I watched the clock and watched the blade. 24 to 48 hours, every time when I did it right. And doing it right matters, so let me give you the practical envelope before anybody runs out and torches their lawn. You spray iron in the cool of the morning, when the air is under about 80 degrees. Iron on a hot blade in the middle of a Texas afternoon can burn the leaf. You'll get speckling and bronzing instead of green, and that's a self-inflicted wound. So early morning, cool air, under 80. You spray a light rate. More is not better with iron. This is not a soak-it-down situation. You're misting the blade until it's wet, not flooding the soil. Water the grass, not the ground. And the color isn't permanent. Nothing is. It holds for several weeks, and then as the lawn grows and you mow off the treated blades, it fades. So through the growing season, you reapply every 3 to 4 weeks to keep that deep color locked in. Light rate, cool morning, every 3 to 4 weeks. That's the rhythm. And again, none of this is on the fertilizer bag, because the fertilizer bag wants you measuring your lawn's health in inches of growth, not in depth of color. Growth is what sells the next bag. Now I want to be straight with you, because if you walk into a garden center and ask for iron, somebody is going to try to walk you past the cheap stuff and over to the expensive bottle. And this is the layer most people never get to. They'll point you at chelated iron. That's iron wrapped in a protective molecule, sold as FeEDTA or FeDTPA, and it costs several times what plain ferrous sulfate costs. The pitch is that it's more available, more advanced, more premium. And here's the truth, most folks selling it won't separate out for you. Chelation only matters when you're putting iron in the soil. The whole point of wrapping the iron in a chelate is to protect it from that high pH lockup I told you about, so it survives in the dirt long enough for roots to grab it. That's a real thing. In the soil, chelated iron earns its price. But you're not putting it in the soil. You're spraying it on the leaf. Foliar. And the leaf absorbs the iron directly. It doesn't care whether that iron was wrapped in a fancy molecule or came straight off a pound of feed store copperas. The blade takes it in either way. So, for foliar spraying on turf, the cheap ferrous sulfate works just as well. And per dollar, it works better, because you're getting many times the iron for the same money and applying it where the chelation buys you nothing. I tested both. The same way I ran horticultural vinegar at 5, 10, and 20% against broadleaf weeds, and watched what actually happened over 30 days instead of trusting the label hype. I sprayed cheap ferrous sulfate side by side against the premium chelated bottle on turf. The blade greened up the same. The cheap stuff won on cost, and it didn't lose on color. So when somebody steers you toward the expensive chelate for a foliar lawn spray, they're selling you a soil solution for a leaf problem. That's not a lie exactly, it's just the part of the truth that happens to cost more. And that's the whole reveal, really. A pale lawn in July usually isn't a nitrogen problem, it's an iron problem hiding behind a soil pH that locks the iron away. You fix it by going around the soil entirely and feeding the blade directly with $1 a gallon mineral the feed store has sold for a century. The grass deepens to its richest green in 2 days, with no growth surge, no extra mowing, and no fungus-feeding flush of soft tissue. Because you intensified the chlorophyll instead of forcing new cells. And you can skip the premium chelated upsell, because for a foliar spray, the cheap powder is the smart buy, not the compromise. Every piece of that, the diagnosis, the mechanism, the speed, the cost, points the same direction. It points away from the nitrogen bag. Which is exactly why it took me years of working lawns to stumble onto it, instead of just reading it on a label the way I should have been able to. Now I've given you the what, the why, and the how. I've named the liquid and I've told you why it works the way it does. What I haven't handed you yet is the exact ratio. How many ounces and how much water. And that one cheap additive I promised that keeps this stuff from staining your concrete and your shoes orange. I'm holding those for the end, and I'll give you every number. But before I do, I want to take a quick second because understanding why this got buried is just as important as the recipe itself. Now, before we keep going, I want to tell you about something. If today is clicking and you're starting to realize that everything you were told about lawn color was backwards, that you were trained to buy a product instead of fix the actual problem, then you're going to want the rest of what I do. I put the whole thing in a book called Larry's 30-Day Weed Kill Protocol. It's $17 at larrysgardenbooks.com, and Chapter 1 is titled, Why Everything You Know About Weeds is Wrong. It takes this exact same reframe. You've been sold a product, not a fix, and applies it to every weed in your yard. If you're watching on your TV, grab your phone right now and point it at the QR code on screen. Take your time finding it. I'll be right here. All right. Here's why this got buried. And it comes down to one word. Repeat. Nitrogen is a consumable. You put it down, the grass burns through it in a few weeks. The color fades, the lawn thins, and you walk right back into the store for another bag. That's not a flaw in the product. From a business standpoint, that's the whole point. Recurring revenue. A perfect repeat purchase. You are the subscription. Iron does the opposite of everything they need it to do. It gives you weeks of deep color with no growth surge. It costs pennies a gallon. And ferrous sulfate is an unpatentable commodity. Any feed store on any back road sells it by the pound to anybody who walks in. You can't build a marketing budget around something nobody can own. So they didn't. They left it off the bag. They put nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in big, bold, guaranteed analysis numbers on the front, and they shoved iron into the fine print, or out of the formula entirely. Tie that back to where we started. Those post-war plants needed somewhere to send the nitrogen surplus, and the suburban lawn became the market. The label was built around the product they had a mountain of, not the nutrient your grass was actually short on. Now, I want to be straight with you, because you're smart enough to see the obvious counter-argument. You do still need nitrogen. Real growth, real density, recovery after a hot summer. That takes nitrogen. And iron is not a full replacement for it. I'm not telling you to throw out the fertilizer bag. I'm telling you it's only part of the picture. Iron is the cheap missing piece they never printed on the label, not a substitute for everything. The one thing they left out because there's no money in it. And here's the personal cost of that. For years, I overspent chasing green I could have made in my garage. I scalped and thinned lawns piling on nitrogen they didn't need. I fought fungus that only showed up because the growth was soft and lush. I mowed twice a week to keep up with growth I never wanted in the first place. All of it. For a problem $1 of iron would have solved in 48 hours. All right, here's the recipe, every number, like I promised. You want 3 ounces of garden-grade ferrous sulfate dissolved into 1 gallon of water. Stir it until it's dissolved. It goes in a little cloudy and that's fine. Then add a couple drops of plain dish soap. That's your surfactant. It breaks the surface tension so the liquid sticks to the blade instead of beating off. You apply that at 1 gallon per 1,000 square feet. And you spray it early in the morning, when the air's under 80 degrees, so you don't burn the leaf. Light, even pass. You're watering the grass, not the soil. Now here's the additive I teased at the very start. The one cheap thing that makes this whole trick actually usable. Citric acid. About 1 tablespoon per gallon. A few cents worth, the same stuff you'd find in a canning aisle. Here's what it does. Iron, left on its own, oxidizes. It turns to rust. That's why ferrous sulfate will stain concrete, brick, and your shoes a permanent rust orange if you're careless with it. The citric acid chelates the iron. It wraps it up. So instead of oxidizing onto your driveway, it rinses clean off with water. Add that 1 tablespoon and overspray that lands on your walk wipes away instead of staining for years. A few more safeguards. Sweep any overspray off your hardscape before it dries. If you splash the driveway, rinse it right then. Don't wait. And spray when the concrete is dry, not damp, because damp soaks it in. That's the detail that turns this from a stained-up mess into a clean, repeatable system. And it's exactly the kind of thing that gets left out when somebody's selling you a finished product in a bottle. Because the bottle isn't trying to teach you, it's trying to sell you the next one. Before I let you go, color today is one thing, but a lawn that stays deep green and dense enough to crowd weeds out, season after season, that's not a one-off spray. That's a calendar. That's a system. And it's exactly what I lay out in Chapter 9 of the book, The No-Weed Garden Year-Round. The month-by-month maintenance schedule that keeps the lawn thick instead of just chasing problems after they show up. The whole book's 88 pages, $17, at larrysgardenbooks.com. This isn't another one-off tip. It's the permanent system. If you're on your TV, point your phone at the QR code on the screen. If you're on your phone already, the link's right down in the description. Go ahead and pull it up now. No rush. Take a second. I'll wait. All right, here's the takeaway. 3 ounces of ferrous sulfate and a tablespoon of citric acid in a gallon of water, sprayed early morning. And you'll have the deepest green on the block in 48 hours, with no growth surge and no extra mowing. That color was never about the nitrogen bag. It never was. And now you can mix it in your garage for about $1 a gallon, anytime you want it. Next time you're standing in the fertilizer aisle wondering why the green never lasts, you'll know exactly what they left off the label. If you want another one of these the industry would rather you skip, look into corn gluten meal as a natural pre-emergent. Dr. Nick Christian's research out of Iowa State. A weed preventer hiding in plain sight at the feed store. I'll get into that one soon. Go check your lawn. You'll see what I mean. I'll see you in the next one. Last fall, I overseeded just over 3,000 square feet of thin, patchy, sun-beaten lawn. And by week 6, I had a stand of grass so thick and so deeply green that my neighbor actually pulled his truck over in the road and asked me what I had done differently this year. The funny part is, I didn't spend more money. I didn't water more. Take it across the bare spots, drag a rake over it, and pray for rain. And every fall, I'd end up with the same result. A weak, spotty germination, half the seed eaten by birds, or washed into the gutter, and a lawn that looked maybe 10% better than it did before I started. The breakthrough came when I started reading turf research out of Penn State and watching a few old groundskeepers from local sports fields talk about how they prep seed before it ever hits the ground. There's one small step in their process that almost nobody on YouTube talks about. My fill-in time got cut almost in half, and the color of the new grass came in noticeably darker and richer. That's the hidden trick I'm going to share with you today. And stay with me to the end, because that preceding trick I just mentioned is the one thing that separates a so-so overseeding job from a lawn your neighbors actually stop and notice. Let's walk through it together. Now, before we get into the how, I want to be straight with you, because I made every mistake in the book before I figured this out. For years, I'd wait too long in the season. I'd buy whatever seed was on sale at the big box store, sometimes 3 different brands across 3 different falls. I'd skip aeration because it felt like too much work, and I'd look out at my lawn and wonder why it still looked tired. If you've been doing any of that, trust me, you're in good company. I was right there with you, scratching my head and blaming the weather. Here's the thing. When I finally stopped guessing and started paying attention to what professional groundskeepers do, I realized overseeding isn't really about the seed at all. It's about contact, moisture, and timing. Once that clicked, everything else fell into place. So let me give you the one core idea that ties this whole video together, because once you understand it, the steps are going to make perfect sense. Grass seed needs 3 things to germinate well. It needs direct contact with soil. It needs consistent moisture for about 14 to 21 days. And it needs a soil temperature in the right range, which for cool season grasses like fescue, Kentucky bluegrass, and ryegrass is somewhere between 50 and 65 degrees Fahrenheit. That's it. That's the whole science. Most overseeding fails not because the seed was bad, but because one of those 3 conditions wasn't met. After testing this approach for 3 full seasons in my own yard, I consistently get germination rates north of 85%. And once you stop fighting the seed and start setting up those 3 conditions on purpose, your lawn really does take care of the rest. It's simpler than you think. All right, let's walk through the actual steps. The first thing you want to do, and this needs to happen about 3 to 4 weeks before your first expected frost, is mow your lawn shorter than usual. I drop my mower down to about 2 inches for the overseeding cut, which is lower than I'd ever cut during the regular season. The reason is straightforward. Shorter grass lets sunlight reach the soil's surface, and it gives your new seed a fighting chance to make contact with bare ground instead of getting tangled in tall blades and dying up there. Once you've cut it short, bag those clippings. Don't mulch them back in. You want a clean surface. Then take a stiff garden rake or a leaf rake and work the thin and bare areas, scratching up the top 1/4 inch of soil. You're not trying to till the lawn. You're just breaking the surface crust so seed can settle in. Here's where most people go wrong. They skip this part because it feels tedious. But this is the difference between seed that germinates and seed that sits on top of dead thatch and never roots. Now, with your lawn cut short and the surface scratched up, the next thing you want to do is aerate. And I'm going to be honest with you, this is the single highest leverage step in the whole process. You can rent a Knorr aerator from your local hardware store for about $70 to $90 for a half day. Run it over your lawn in 2 passes, the second pass perpendicular to the first. What this does is pull plugs of soil out of the ground, leaving thousands of little holes that act like perfect seed pockets. Water gets down to the root zone, oxygen reaches the soil microbes, and your new seed has somewhere protected to fall. The conventional approach is to dethatch with a power rake, which tears up your existing lawn, is core aeration. It's gentler, it works deeper, and the soil plugs break down on their own within about 2 weeks. Just leave them on the lawn. They're free fertilizer. The biggest mistake people make, and trust me on this one because I made it for years, is buying a different bag of seed every season. You end up with a patchwork lawn where one section is rye, another is fescue, and a third is some no-name contractor mix. The colors don't match, the textures don't match, and the lawn looks uneven no matter how well you mow it. For cool season lawns in zones 3 through 6, I recommend a tall fescue blend, or a fescue and bluegrass mix from a reputable brand. For warm season lawns in zones 7 through 10, you're typically overseeding with perennial ryegrass over Bermuda for winter color, or sticking with your base species. Whatever you choose, look at the label. You want a germination rate above 85% and a weed seed content below 0.5%. For application rate, you want about 4 to 6 pounds of seed per 1,000 square feet for overseeding. Not 8, not 10. More seed doesn't mean more grass. It means more competition between seedlings, and they choke each other out. Load that seed into a broadcast spreader, set it to the rate the bag recommends, and walk the lawn in 2 passes, the second pass perpendicular to the first, just like you did with the aerator. Before we get into watering and fertilizing, I want to pause for just a second because what I'm showing you today is one piece of a much bigger system I've put together for homeowners who are tired of fighting their lawn every season. If you struggle with weeds the way I used to, with clover taking over in spring and crabgrass showing up in summer, I put together a guide called Larry's 30-Day Weed Kill Protocol. It's a day-by-day plan that walks you through identifying the 7 most common lawn weeds, exactly which products to use, when to apply them, and how to keep those weeds from coming back next year. It also has a full seasonal maintenance calendar, so you're never guessing what to do next. You can grab it for $17 right now, down from $47, by scanning the QR code on your screen or clicking the link in the description. All right, let's keep going. Once your seed is down, the very next thing you do, and I mean within an hour or so, is apply. This is non-negotiable. Starter fertilizers are formulated with a higher phosphorus content, usually something like a 12-18-8 or a 16-25-12 ratio. And that middle number, the phosphorus, is what fuels root development in young seedlings. Regular lawn fertilizer has almost no phosphorus. And if you use it on new seed, you can actually burn what's germinating. Apply your starter at the rate listed on the bag, which is usually about 3 to 4 pounds per 1,000 square feet, and put it down with the same broadcast spreader you used for your seed. Don't overlap your passes too much. You don't need a heavy coat. You just need even coverage. Now watering. This is where most overseeding jobs live or die. New seed needs to stay consistently moist for the first 2 to 3 weeks. Not soaked, not sopping wet, just damp like a wrung-out sponge. The experts will tell you the seed can never dry out, and while that's the ideal, I'm going to be honest with you. None of us are home all day with a hose. What I do, and what works for almost every homeowner I've helped, is water lightly twice a day. Once in the early morning before work, and once when I get home in the late afternoon. Each watering is short, maybe 10 to 15 minutes per zone, just enough to keep the top inch of soil damp. If you get a couple of rainy days in there, that's a gift. Skip your watering for those days. The biggest mistake I see is people watering too deep too early. which washes the seed downhill and leaves bare patches at the top of the slope. Light and frequent. That's the rule for the first 3 weeks. After germination, you can taper down to longer, deeper waterings every other day, which trains the roots to grow downward. While you're waiting for your seedlings to come in, the most important thing you can do is leave the lawn alone. Stay off it. Keep kids and pets and lawn equipment off the new areas for at least 4 full weeks. I know it's hard, especially if you've got a big yard, but every footprint compacts the soil and breaks young roots. Don't mow until your new grass is at least 3 to 3.5 inches tall, which usually means waiting 4 to 5 weeks after seeding. When you do that first mow, make sure your mower blade is sharp. A dull blade tears young grass right out of the ground instead of cutting it cleanly. I put a fresh blade on my mower every fall before the first cut on new seed, and trust me on this one, it makes a real difference. Bag your clippings for the first 2 or 3 mows. After that, you can go back to mulching. Now, before I get to the bonus tip I promised you at the beginning, I want to talk about a few common patterns I see homeowners fall into, because avoiding these will save you a whole season of frustration. The first pattern is overseeding at the wrong time of year. People get the urge in spring, when the lawn looks rough after winter, and they dump seed down in April or May. The problem is, soil temperatures are still climbing, weed pressure is at its peak, and your young grass is going right into the heat of summer with no root system. Fall is the answer. Late August through mid-September for most of the country. The soil is still warm, the air is cooling, weed competition is dropping off, and your new grass has all autumn and the following spring to establish before summer stress hits. The second pattern is over-applying seed. I see homeowners put down 10 or 12 pounds per 1,000 square feet, thinking they're going to get a thicker lawn. What actually happens is the seedlings come up so densely that they can't develop strong individual root systems, and the whole stand thins out within a few months. Stick to the rate. 4 to 6 pounds per 1,000 for overseeding is plenty. The third pattern, and I did this myself for years, is skipping the starter fertilizer to save $20. Don't. Starter fertilizer pays for itself many times over in faster germination and stronger root development. This is one place where the cheap option is genuinely the expensive option in the long run. And the fourth pattern is giving up too soon. New grass takes a full season to mature. You're going to see germination at 2 to 3 weeks, real coverage at 6 weeks, and a lawn that genuinely fills in by the following spring. If you overseed in September and your lawn doesn't look magazine perfect by October, that's normal. Be patient. Give it 1 full season before you judge the results. All right, here's the trick I promised you at the beginning, and this is the one nobody talks about. It's called pre-germinating your seed, and it's what I learned from old-school sports field groundskeepers who use it to overseed baseball outfields and football pitches. Here's what you do. 3 to 5 days before you plan to spread your seed, take it out of the bag and put it in a 5-gallon bucket. Cover it with cool water, just enough to submerge the seed by about an inch, and let it soak for 24 hours. Then drain the water off, but keep the seed damp. I usually mix it with about an equal volume of damp peat moss, or coco coir at this point, just to keep moisture even and prevent clumping. Stir it once a day. Within 3 to 4 days, you'll see the seeds start to swell, and some will even crack open with a tiny white root tip starting to emerge. When you spread that seed onto your prepared lawn, you're not waiting 14 days for germination. You're waiting 3 to 5. The seed has already started the hardest part of the process indoors, in perfect conditions, where birds can't eat it and dry weather can't kill it. Your visible green-up happens almost twice as fast. Your germination rate jumps, and because the seed roots down so quickly, you get a much thicker, more uniform stand of grass. The only catch is you have to keep the soil very moist for those first few days after spreading, because pre-germinated seed will die fast if it dries out. So plan your overseeding for a stretch of mild, cloudy weather, or be ready to water lightly 3 times a day for the first week. After that, you go right back to the twice-a-day schedule. I tested this for 2 seasons before I trusted it, and now I won't overseed any other way. That's the hidden trick that takes a lawn from average to emerald. So that's the full method. Mow short and clean up. Scratch the surface and aerate. Choose one quality seed and stick with it. Apply at the right rate. Put down starter fertilizer. Water light and frequent. Stay off the lawn and pre-germinate if you really want to take it to the next level. If today's video helped you see overseeding in a new way, the 30-day weed kill protocol is the natural next step. Because here's the thing. The best overseeding job in the world won't save your lawn if weeds are choking it out by next June. The protocol gives you the exact day-by-day system I use, including pre-emergent timing for spring crabgrass, post-emergent application techniques for clover and dandelion, spot treatment methods for stubborn perennial weeds, identification photos for the 7 most common lawn weeds, and a full seasonal calendar, so you know exactly what to do every month of the year. It's written in plain English. No fluff, just the plan. $17, down from $47. Scan the QR code on your screen or click the link in the description, and I'll see you on the inside. If this video helped you out, do me a favor and leave a comment letting me know what your lawn looks like right now and what you're hoping to fix this fall. I read everyone. Hit subscribe if you're not already, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care of that lawn, and trust me, it'll take care of you.